turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hey, Tim, good morning.
Is it Ryan?
Sure.
Hang on, let me go outside and look through the window, and I'll tell you.
Is it looking good?
Looks great.
Then great morning to you, Tim.
Oh, hey, hi.
And to you...
Let me just, hang on, I gotta crawl in through this window.
And to you there listening, whether it's morning, day, night, and everything in between, thank you for being here. Where is here? Here is Dismembering Horror, episode 144 specifically of Dismembering Horror. In fact, we welcome you to our boudoir where we dismember all that is horrific and horror films. We talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything else we found interesting or noteworthy. We're on a mission for the macabre, a hunt for the horrendous. Hey, the next one's yours, Tim.
A trek of terror.
Yeah. An expedition to the unexplored.
Hey,
Though
now.
That doesn't work. Wait. Anyways, yeah, and we've made it to episode 144, where we'll be talking about Peeping Tom from 1960. The same year that Psycho came out. I believe this came out a few months before Psycho, and is also by British filmmaker is also by a British filmmaker. In this case, not Alfred Hitchcock, but Michael Powell. It's also produced by him and written by Leo Marks. There's that. There are the credits. Boom, bada boom.
Bing.
Great. Anything else you want to check up with about our show here, Tim?
No, not really.
Okay.
You get to see you in face-to-face real life.
Yeah. Or is it?
Well, yeah, what is real life at this point?
Your face is obscured by the pop filter.
You know what?
There.
So is yours, okay? By your beard.
It is. True. Great. All right. Well, in that case, we can start in how we like to do with the trailer for today's film.
Yeah.
You ready for that?
Of course.
All right. Here we go. As I said, from 1960, Peeping Tom.
Look out! Look out! Look out! Take care. You are being watched. We repeat, take care, for you are now alone with a killer. We warn you, don't let him see the fear in your eyes. For this is what he seeks, and this is why he kills.
Where are you? Where are you?
Look out for Carl Byrne as the Peeping Tom. Fear him, but pity him also.
It's no good.
Watch out for Moira Shearer as the lovely stand-in who innocently dances into danger.
Imagine someone coming towards you who wants to kill you, regardless of consequences.
A madman?
Yes.
Carl Boom. Boom.
Boom.
Boom. Anyways, great.
Pretty exciting.
You know, I'd love to know, Tim, for our rating system, would you tell yourself to avoid, stream, rent, or buy this film, and why?
It's pretty good. I think I'm still just a rent. But it's close. It's just not quite... it doesn't quite excite me enough. I'm not sure why. We'll figure it out. But it's really good. I mean, it's got a ton of great stuff. So it's not a knock against it in any way. I think it's just I don't know. Me. It's just me. I'm a rent.
Yeah. I think I'm similar. I'm a lower rent as far as like personal this viewing enjoyment, but I acknowledge it's a great film though. I think it was just one of those weird cases where for whatever reason I wasn't like super into it while watching it.
Could it have been that this movie holds the world record for most times a character says the name Mark?
No. You're just saying that?
Yeah.
That's what you picked up on?
I got to a point where I was like, if she says Mark one more time, I'm going to lose it. And the instant I said that out loud, she said it, and I just started yelling.
So otherwise, that would have been a buy it for you.
That's right.
Okay. Great. All right. A double rent. Pretty strong still. We'll get into all the ins and outs of why. But before then, what are we even talking about? What happened in this movie? How would you concisely summarize the course of events?
Why you got to qualify it with concisely? Now I got to try and be concise? God.
A synopsis.
Okay. Oh, God. So there's this dude, Mark. He's had a messed up childhood. What a shock. He's kind of a misanthrope, maybe you would say.
Yeah, a British misanthrope, a British thrope.
Yep. And he is a serial killer. He's got a compulsion to film his victims as he kills them. And he goes on a bit of a serial.
And the greater story we learn in the end is this is all for a documentary he's making where it is to conclude with his own death at the hands of himself by the same way he's killed the victims.
Right, and we get into the sort of the details of what motivated him, which is his dad, who was definitely abusive, was a psychologist and was studying fear and using his son as sort of a subject, and that's spurred on his psychosis.
Right. He's continuing his father's studies in a way, albeit from an artistic point of view, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. He's got a cool job, though. He's like a focus puller for a studio.
And he's got a side hustle.
Yep, he's got some nice side hustles.
Yeah.
Rocking the nudie pics.
Right. It's funny, was that whole little setup that he was working for, it's like a little like market that's family friendly, even though it has the nudie pics all outside the door and everything.
Right.
And it seems that they're shooting those pictures like above in the same building.
Yeah.
So there's this whole operation going on that he's a part of.
Yeah, it's the thinly veiled, like, we're a corner, whatever you would call that, commissary or something like that.
It's corner store, I guess. Yeah.
It's like a convenience store that is just riddled with pictures of naked women on the front of it. It's like, it's not like they're hiding something.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get into the fun of that.
Anyway, and then also just to mention, since this is part of the thrust of our story here, he is being befriended by the neighbor.
His tenant.
Right.
Ironically, I guess.
After our last episode, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, called The Tenant. Great. Yeah. I guess we could mention that too. The building he's in that they're renting out the different rooms to, like, it's the same building that he grew up in with his parents.
Right.
So we learned some exciting modifications that his father has made along the way. But I guess I didn't even realize, there's all this movie's mentioned a lot with similarities to Psycho. I guess that's kind of one too, in a way, of where he is living at the house he grew up in that's renting its rooms out to people. That's it's a boarding house for an apartment versus a motel.
Right.
Oh, interesting.
Cool.
Great. Well, should we get into the thick of it here and talk about what worked?
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. On with our first section. As I just said, what worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm.
What worked? What worked for you?
Well, I guess I'll get this one out of the way because it feels so like outside of the movie itself, but just so a product of the time that I enjoyed. I've kind of brought it up how I was watching other movies from this era that feels like it's the transition from what we think, from the 50s to the 60s, but also sort of what we think of as those like stereotypes or versions or whatever. And this was really cool to sort of filmically see that, where it has the kind of like, it's got the bright, like Technicolor like look to it, the acting style, everything about it, the filmmaking style feels very 50s still. But then you're just, the subject matter and what's going on in it is definitely transgressive. And we'll get into this film was not looked upon well upon release, but just due to like due to like controversy and you know not even willing to accept it. Could be a good movie anyways. But yeah, just looking at it through that lens worked for me. I enjoyed like we technically had an end final girl,
That's
but
true, yeah.
But wouldn't even notice it because it is just such like a 50s feeling movie. So I don't know. It was really cool. You hear this as the first slasher or one of the first ones or something like that a lot. So it was just neat to look at it from that lens.
Well, and the opening scene is so kind of like quintessential what we think of as how you depict the slasher.
Yeah, it was just like Halloween, right?
Yeah, it's handheld, first person camera, following the victim until they kill him.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's the opening shot is this, it's such a set. And it's very like, God, the design, I guess, is what stands out of this entire film. The color and art design and the lighting, obviously, because so much of it is the lighting is what's giving it color. It's so cool. I mean, I just think the whole all-around palette and the lighting techniques and the art design like are working super, super well. Mm-hmm. And it kind of to your point, I guess, like this 50s style of filmmaking, I mean, like what we kind of, at least what I envision when I think of 50s movies is there, but there's like, I would almost describe it, it's like the 50s style of filmmaking is the bowl that the rest of the more kind of like subversive avant-garde or like stylish aspects of the filmmaking, are inside of this bowl. Mm-hmm. And there's something really kind of cool, like it does feel transitional. Mm-hmm. Like, you had to kind of still hang on to some of these older, techniques or whatever to get through these new style, whatever points.
Yeah.
And then as a result, we move into the 60s. And I think a lot of filmmakers were like, oh, wait, you can do that. Let's do that. Let's do some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, let's get nutty with the lights.
Right. To different or lack thereof too, or to different extents too.
Yeah. So that opening scene, man, is really cool.
Yeah.
I love that they show us what you would see through the viewfinder of the camera, and it's in color, so it's like real time. And then when we cut to him in the credits scene or watching what he's filmed, we get to see the actual projection that is the result of the filming in black and white.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I was like, wait, how do you think they did that? Like, they just put a crosshair on, I don't know, like, how did they do it? It's
movie
cool.
magic.
It's really cool. they probably just put a fake crosshair over the film stock, the color film stock, and then pull it out and just put it, show it in black and process it in black and white and actually project it onto the screen in real time.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing the actual projected. It's just a lot of that, like the ins and outs of sort of the camera work and the camera. I guess how would you describe this? It's like the meta-ness almost of we're watching a film depicting a film or films and a filmmaker's techniques in those films, and we're seeing first person through the camera in the film that we're seeing that is through a camera.
Wait, but then
you know what I mean? We're like, I just think that whole construct is really fun and cool.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're getting at too. It's like, not only just are we seeing the point of view of the camera, but like we're seeing him watch it later. So that's where
right.
It gets into the meta thing. We're watching someone watch the film that we just saw get shot.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
all of that, to me, just that construct and the setup of all of that, and like having the opening scene really be like, hey, this is what you're in for.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. It's so smart filmmaking. It's just like, let's just hand you what to be ready for, and then just go from there and like off to the races.
Yes. In the filmic standpoint, we're being set up with here's what you're in for. I thought it was really interesting though, how you compare it to like the opening scene of Halloween. It's very much like that. We don't see him. All that we see is his, like, the cameras in the coat, and it's just all on the victim. But then it becomes like he's our hero, so to speak. He's our
Right.
protagonist that we follow along, where it's not as if he's this, built up to be like a murderer who's, we aren't with or something. I don't know, but it feels like it was playing on a trope before it even existed in a way. It was weirdly.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to think or like do some research to think about, like, there's two films that spring to mind where we kind of are with the anti-hero, but not quite. And they're both Robert Mitchum films, which I think is interesting. I think that's right. So, Night of the Stalker.
I mean, I don't know if you could use other ones that we've watched though too, but I thought of Martin.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's very true.
And I mean, another similar vampire one, The Transfiguration,
Yes, totally.
But I was just getting more at specifically, it felt like as if this was a way ahead of its time movie where it went like, but what if after the opening scene with the killer, we were just with them the rest of the movie as the protagonist? And this just was that before that was even sort of a self-aware angle to it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was interesting. I thought like that.
Night of the Hunter, sorry,
Okay.
not Stalker, and Cape Fear both have that. Almost like we want to sympathize, or not. I don't know. Sympathize is the wrong word, but we're enjoying the bad guy. I don't know how to put it. Like, we're like compelled by the bad guy.
Compelled by him. It's different though. It's more like we're compelled by him, or at least for me in this one, as a curiosity standpoint, but still mostly at a distance. And to like get into a bit who his character is, I thought it was really interesting. We're getting it's easy to compare with Psycho. He felt like an even stuffier Norman Bates. Like even if, and that's sort of just because of their culture, it feels like, where you have these two guys, same like, equatable issues, let's say. Norman though has the safety and veneer of like the American small talk, let's say.
Aw shucks.
Yeah, exactly. He can fall back into sort of this like accepted casual conversation. He can still be like eating his candy corn and it's kind of like casual and okay. Right. But the difference here with, I won't forget his name now, Mark.
How could you?
Is he's like as I said, like the even stuffier Norman. He's wrapped up in the Britishness where it feels like he's even, I don't know. I guess I don't want to say he's more repressed, but it's because they're both equally repressed, but just sort of how they then can be in their interactions. It's interesting how Mark is even more just sort of like, I don't know how to exist at all. Like he barely talks because it just sort of feels so just like there is no kind of small talk that's formalized he can even fall into.
Well, I think, the big difference to me is that Norman Bates knows how to cover.
Mm-hmm.
He knows how to play at seeming somewhat normal, even though at times it leaks and he is awkward or whatever. Mark doesn't seem to know how to cover. Like the second he's triggered, he's like, oh no.
Right.
He just becomes very internalized, like, I don't know how to deal with any of this, and retreats most of the time. The only time we see him kind of reverse on that is when the heroine, Helen, when she forces him to put his camera away. And suddenly he becomes, it's like he's no longer tethered to his neuroses, and he kind of comes out. He becomes a little gregarious, but like the world is conspiring against him. It's like continues to remind him on their walk that like it has this, whatever you want to call it, affliction.
Yeah.
But all of that, and I mean, that scene is really cool because of that. But I think that's, it's really good storytelling to show us how his character operates without being so like on the nose or heavy-handed about it.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like his demeanor, he lightens up and he becomes a little more like, oh yeah, there is a world out here and you're nice, and oh, there's a restaurant that we should go to. You know what I mean? He suddenly becomes personable when he's like never been that way prior.
He laughs for the only time in the whole movie.
That's right. Yeah.
I think, I mean, that's a great scene, sequence, whatever you want to call it, but just example of, I think, a fun theme explored section.
Yeah.
And it's a good in for all this talk, because this was like my favorite, the best stuff about this movie. And actually, like, Jump had this kind of a thing of note, but I think it was Scorsese's a big fan of this filmmaker and this film. It's kind of held it up over the years in different ways. But he said between this film and 8.5, you can explore and know everything you need to know about like filmmaking itself, just as a thing to thematically explore. So for this one, and it being a horror movie, it gets into, and we always, I always like come back to, all right, so horror, there's always some sort of paradox, the dualistic, paradox around all horror ideas. The one in this one is how like about filmmaking itself and even just usage of a camera in your reality. It's like, yeah, I was going to say the double-edged coin. What did I say?
That sounds right. Yep.
Of that filmmaking and films and just picture taking, they allow us a certain like lens as a medium, not a non-literal lens. It's a medium that does allow us to sort of feel more connected to each other and, explore ideas. There's we get a deeper look at life, all the things it provides, right? Yet simultaneously, it is an act of like separation for the one who's making it. You have to then you're an observer. You're outside of it.
You're hiding in a way.
Yeah, you're
putting a barrier between you and whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's really, really cool.
Because, and you see, just as far as just, you can take it, but I just want to tie it back to then that scene where like, then the only time he doesn't have that separation of a camera, he's more personable.
Yeah. Well, there's this sort of construct, I guess, of, the the tropes, I guess, around being in front of the camera or being behind the camera. And what does that imply? And like, what are the differences between the person who wants to be in front of the camera and who wants to be behind it? And, I guess you could kind of say like, typically and generally, the person who wants to be in front of the camera is kind of an ego-driven person, right? Like they're self-centered in that they think that being filmed or photographed or captured is a validation of themselves in some way. Whereas like the person behind the camera has this duality of being hidden and like separated from reality because they're literally seeing it through something that is distorting it. But also they are a creator. They're almost in a, quote unquote, God position because they're dictating what the result is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this kind of interesting thing with Mark, and maybe with all photographers and filmmakers, I don't know, of like, you're kind of playing God, but you're also hiding from the world. It's an Oz almost-esque aspect too. But when you take that away, what are you?
Right.
And in this case, he actually becomes more human.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of the times we would think that if you take that away, he would lose his identity. We actually get to see more of a personality and possibly identity. But, the world has conspired against him.
Right.
I guess.
And then it's though like,
or he thinks so.
Then it's interesting how, let's say we were able to see his finished film, we might then see his personality come through in that.
Yeah, it's almost like he's, by virtue of being, subjected to this sort of childhood abuse and being the subject rather than the son, I think is sort of the root of all of this. Damn it, I lost my train of thought.
Wait, the subject rather than the son?
So like in the father-son construct that should exist, he's never parented. Right? He's tortured by his dad because he's the subject of his dad's study.
Well, that's really interesting because it makes the comparison of the filmmaker and the scientist, let's say, as in the observer position.
Yep. And
it, especially, with a father and his son, just elucidates that so well of like he's not my son. He's a subject to be observed. It's
kind of gross.
Yeah.
It's certainly not healthy, let's say.
Nor is throwing lizards on your son and recording their reaction.
I was watching this with Britt and like we both were like, whoa, what is going on? Like, Jesus Christ. Like what? And actually Helen's response to it is totally appropriate. She's like, wait, what? Hey, what is happening? Mark, why are you Mark, what is happening? Why is he doing that, Mark?
That was like, I don't know, it might be my favorite part in the movie, but that was the moment I really sat up. Where if there's something so fiendish and sinister too, the idea of the father just like throwing this lizard on a kid to like freak him out. It's just, that's so messed up.
It is so messed up.
And that was, of course, I mean, then to get into like his larger backstory was, as you said, always key, always offers some fun stuff for this. But if that was specifically a neat angle where we actually had these like literal clues we could look at of their home videos and just, I don't know, then that turning us into the observer in a way of like when I guess his mother dies and he remarries in a matter of like a month or something like that. And when we see that footage of the new wife posing with young Mark, and then the dad though comes in the shot, and at first he's out of focus.
I love that.
Yeah, we're like trying to get a look at this guy. I'm like, what is this guy's deal who is throwing a lizard on his kid? And watch it, like filming his reaction to watching a couple making out in the park. Like, it's all so weird.
Well, it's just so... again, it's this separation thing of thinking that you're doing this good, because you're studying, but you're literally putting this like chasm between you, the parent, and parenting.
Well, yeah,
it's
like, are you really? It's that question. I mean, we aren't parents, shouldn't talk, but it's just interesting of like are you protecting more actually by being such the helicopter parent or whatever the term is,
Sure.
And
I think healthy boundaries exist.
Yeah. Well, you can, even though look at an example of our government, let's say, of, extending its rights to spy on citizens kind of thing, like all that. Because that was, some real conversation, as in, the movie kind of material with the father, we learn in the end, has wired all the rooms in the house on different reel-to-reel recorders. So now Mark is using that to essentially spy on the what's her name, on everyone who lives there, but Helen and her mom as well.
Yeah, I think it look, at the end of the day, it's not black and white, right? It's not, there's not like one way that's good and one way that's bad, but there is a balance of like, hey, maybe observing people to the extent of like completely breaking any sense of privacy, and just in the name of like, oh, it's for my study, so therefore it's okay.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like there are healthy boundaries that exist. Like you shouldn't probably, and we just agree on most of these things in general, like as a race, like, or, the human race agrees upon this.
Right.
I don't really want to be observed without some sort of, at least you saying, hey, is this okay? Like a permission structure.
It's great though, because then we see the opposite of sort of, well, when are the boundaries somehow making a person worse? Maybe, like let's say there's at the beginning when there's the older stuffy British guy who goes in to buy the porno mags or whatever they are. It's like he's so just not comfortable in his own skin.
Yep.
For wanting to buy the pervy mags or whatever they are. Like it's just so funny to watch them go through this whole, like, it's almost like a song and dance routine, just trying to like talk around what he's doing
so
there.
Ridiculous.
Right? It's so ridiculous. Yeah. He can't just be like casual about it in a sense that would feel healthier in a way.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I do. I had that exact same feeling where I was like, God, our culture is often so messed up and stupid about these over sort of, what would be the word? Like over protecting some arbitrary idea of morality or something like that. And it's like, especially now because we live in a different era, that seems overtly ridiculous. Whereas at the time, it was like, I think probably fine. In a weird way, I feel like I am not a historian, so far be it from me to really know what I'm talking about. But just in the vaguest of vague senses of, literature and history and stuff that I've read about, it kind of seems like the 20th century has, or was, since I guess we're out of it, right?
A couple decades now, Tim.
Yeah. It really was this weird century of like overreacting to sexuality. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think it was a little looser before. It seems like it.
It seems like when we talked about this with Gothic, where it seems like behind closed doors, it was looser. As if like the outside, like the presented, like was like the veneer or whatever was stuffier, but then there was this. This is what we get from it. Then this like acceptance of No, but then behind closed doors, everyone was their sort of liberated selves, because maybe there was a bigger sense of privacy back then. Maybe it was just a more acknowledged, like, oh no, honey, this is how we all are behind doors. You know, I don't know.
Well, I wonder too, we're a little off track here, but whatever. I do wonder, because like I've listened to a few pretty interesting podcasts, like historical podcasts about the 1800s and, you know, things like, you know, the pioneering West and whatever. And religion was such a big deal in the movement of like the early, like maybe 1820s to the 1860s-ish. There was this huge component of like people trying to figure out religion, and like you had like all these different ideas being, you know, advocated for, and in some respects probably more of like a traveling salesman kind of realm of like trying to, you know, it's more of a grift. But it existed and people responded to it. Like there was a thirst for it. And you had sort of an older school traditional right-hand path magic sort of thing going on, where you have things like old school stuff like runes and just folklore stuff. And that was the driving force. But like Christian religion was being hawked almost in all these different versions in the States in particular. I'm sure it was happening elsewhere as well, but I don't know about that. And maybe there's a connection, a through line to that, and how all of that just era of exploration of theology played into the resulting next century of being like, oh, we've decided that there's this moral code. Like this is good and this is bad. And sexuality was really wrapped up in that. Maybe for the first time. I don't know. It'd be interesting to go down that rabbit hole.
That sounds about right, that it's the religious influence that then ends up in the guy shopping at the store being like, you know.
Yeah.
I can't connect it back even more to this film where that idea, you see it with the kind of classic, like, and this is another way you can look at this as an early slasher film, where we have that centerpiece murder with the woman who's the extra. And it's almost like a play on the sexually active woman as the victim, where that's represented by her dancing freely and him capturing that in her, and her acting trusting and liberated in that sense. But then
you could say that for all of the victims. Right. To some degree, they're expressing an overt comfort with at least their expression of freeness, right? Liberated expression of some sort. Whether it's sexual or not.
Right. So then to have that met head on with death and murder, it's just like this extreme of like, shut that down.
Yeah.
You, how dare you dance freely?
Yeah. I mean, all of this I think is really cool. And I think what makes it work in this movie is that it doesn't feel heavy-handed at all. Like, I never felt like I was being force-fed anything.
No, it was really built into the story.
Yeah. It's cool. So I have a question in terms of his character. Do you feel like there's something in casting a guy who is, I think, German or maybe Austrian? Like, he's so Aryan, and this is only, 15 years after World War II. You know, I don't know. The UK probably had a pretty strong feeling still about that era and Germans in general, or at least the trope of the Aryan blonde male.
Yeah,
and I couldn't really put a finger on if they were trying to sort of lean into something, but I'm okay with it. It's being a little vague.
I sort of picked up on it both ways. Well, first of all, for whatever it's worth to say on him, he reminded me of Peter Lorre.
I thought the same thing,
eyes.
actually. I was just watching The Maltese Falcon.
Right. But you could say, I read there was an interpretation of his character where it was that he was coming off the kind of the trauma from World War II still itself, not on the, I guess, just, I don't know if it was necessarily side specific when I say that.
Maybe it's just that you're playing on the audience. You're just saying, okay, right now, who should we cast to sort of like just get under the skin a little bit without being too, we don't have to be saying anything about it, but like, who do we as a country view as villainous?
Right. Well, I could see it as the subtext is there for, it's fun to read into.
Yeah.
He's the Aryan-like person whose version of the world didn't pan out.
Sure.
They didn't win. So now here's him trying to exist in the world that won out in a way. It's almost like he's left out to now figure out this new world where, it's not about the area. This is all very non-literal, but just like a subtext interpretation.
Well, actually, yeah. And there is maybe something to the idea of like, he's the product of a person who was dehumanizing him and looking at him only through the lens of how can this help my stature or like my pursuit of something. Yeah. And I think you could connect that to sort of Nazism and eugenics and like the sort of experimentation on children that went on by like really gnarly people at in that era. So he's maybe more so it's a little subtext of here's the result of that. And because he certainly is not like he's not in that realm in any way. Like he's not expressing any overtly sort of Nazi ideals. It doesn't seem like he's just has a affliction. So it seems to me he's more that makes more sense. He's the result of bad parenting,
just like Psycho.
Right.
What was your sort of like? What was your take on this sort of outward most story sense as to what his motivation was? Like, what was the movie telling us to be gathered?
I mean, I like this idea of like obsession with capturing a truth. And, it's kind of the definition or it's the line that we dance back and forth on of like, what does it mean to be crazy? Like he thinks that his pursuit is that he can capture the moment, the expression of the moment of true fear at the moment of death. Right. And he's pursuing this thing, which is like, I guess it's interesting. Like, we want to scientifically learn more about the world, but he's pushing it into this perversion of that pursuit of like, maybe, like don't kill people in the name of that pursuit.
Though I think what's so, this was really cool. This really worked for me about it is he was pushing it to the next degree in the way his father wasn't, where the father's, angle on it and recording him as a kid was just observing, fear.
Well,
but Mark takes it a step.
Yeah.
Mark takes it a step further. That I thought was, it's very, very like snake eating its own tail, like meta to the nth degree. The angle that he takes with it, where it's not just like he said that he's about capturing a truth of like their honest fear in the face of getting murdered. That is happening, but he puts the extra spin on it of also showing them the reflection when they're getting murdered. That's what I'm talking about. That I thought was so fascinating.
Right. They get to see, I mean, the way his experiment works is to make them see their expression of fear at the moment of death.
Right, which...
So it's doubled up.
To
He's
me,
not only capturing that, but he's creating that for them to capture it. It's pretty intense.
Which to me, it puts the focus on, like, let's say you're stabbing me right now, Tim. I can direct my fear at you are an external thing stabbing me, right? And that's all my fear is centralized. But to be forced to look at my own reflection, it's almost like a more direct confrontation with our mortality. I am dying right now, which sounds kind of crazy to point out, as if you being stabbed isn't enough to acknowledge your mortality. Like, of course, I get it. But as far as to look at yourself when doing it, it's sort of almost like he's doubling down on, no, you can't escape the fact. I want you to not just be reacting to, fear in the sense of getting killed, but the realization that you are, this is your actual death in this moment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And the component that I think is sort of metaphorically most compelling is that we spend our lives kind of existing in relation to the world around us. But I think we, mostly philosophically agree that the real pursuit of our lives is to learn and get most in touch with ourselves.
And our own mortality.
Right. And so this thing that he's created is really that. And so the tragedy of him as a character is that he's trying to find this, but he himself will never be able to experience it. Well, because in order to experience it, in order to see the results, he'd have to live through that, and you can't. So he's created this experiment that is impossible for him to ever know the answer.
For him, it's not about that. It's about completing this project and ending it with his own death, where he's similarly or samely, looking at his own reflection when it happens.
Right, but it's flawed because, well, I mean, I guess he considers it to be, like it's altruistic almost in his mind because he's leaving that for the world to understand. But thinking that this is something that the world needs or wants is really the flaw in it.
It's as if he's saying, you look at his victims as representative of his father in a way, then it's as if he's saying to them, oh no, look, you look at yourself for once. You're the one doing all these experiments on me, observing. Don't you see you're just as guilty and exist in the world and should be held accountable?
Yeah, it's pretty cool because there's a bunch of different layers to it. There's also the layer of him being led into his mom's room when she's dead. So he didn't get to see her die. He got to see her after her death. And then in that moment, his dad is filming his reaction to that. So there's sort of this, I don't even know what you would, like how you would kind of what the analogy would be, but there's a lot of, I guess, ripples to this that are really cool.
I mean, I'm just trying to think from to just more of that. Everything the father is doing to his son, recording his reactions. Like, hey, your mom just died. I'm going to show you and record your reaction. It's just so cold. It's again why it's like the ultimate observer, which is just the other form of what he's doing. He's killing women but completely at a distance from it because it's for a film he's making.
Yeah. And justifying it.
Yeah. I just love the idea of the literalizing this is I'm sure Scorsese has the fun field day. He's so obsessed with making his film, he's willing to die for it. He's willing to die for the ending.
Yeah.
This is great.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think the real most basic thesis is, you know, when you don't have connection in your upbringing, like when there's separation from the people who are supposed to be there and like raise you and protect you and love you, it messes you up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of the most basic conclusion that this is pointing at.
And there's something about when it's a disconnection brought on by observing through study. It's this like your acknowledgement of the neglect that's there. It's like in the face of it.
It's cool. I mean, I think in the same way that Psycho explores this other psychological effect, it's based in some really solid stuff. And that, I think, leaves us feeling like we're in good hands, you know? It's not pseudoscience-y. It's kind of like really basic.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know, maybe love your kid and like engage with him on a nice level, and he might turn out okay.
So yeah, he's not a thing in a petri dish.
Right. The dehumanizing of his character leads to him not being able to humanize other people.
Mm-hmm.
The end.
There's
even though he wants to, and he tries, he just can't do it.
There's getting to some more. I just want to also mention that scene. I did think it was great, that middle scene where he kills the extra after getting her to dance. I love there's the touch where he's on the lift, the crane or whatever, and he's raising himself like above her. That was a pretty fun touch like that.
I mean, scene to scene, it's really, the filmmaking is really, really good.
Even the filmmaking within the filmmaking is good. I thought when he was the point of view filming her dancing, it was very well shot.
That's right.
Very nicely composed
Yeah, he's
frame.
a pretty good filmmaker. Mark.
And then I mentioned kind of too the let's see no, I already did just mention that all the rooms being wired by the father. That as the observer mentioned that. My favorite, I had a favorite quote in the movie, which was, I love the blind mother character. It was great.
So good.
She's so suspicious of him from the get-go.
She's almost mystical.
Yeah.
I love that.
She says something to the effect of, when talking with Helen about this suspicious Mark character, she doesn't know how to feel about them. She says, I don't trust men who walk quietly.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so good. It feels like that says a lot right there.
Yeah. I wondered too about her casting and having, because she's not British.
Oh yeah, huh?
She feels almost like maybe a representative of, closer to like, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but like closer to sort of gypsy-ish, right? This, even with her, the being blind, she's got almost like a magic quality to her.
Her knit sweater looks like the dude's kind of. It's funny.
Yeah. So like, I almost feel like there's a little bit of like subtext, of she, like the Germans tried to clean house, and some of their victims were people who like were considered gypsies, and that was considered bad or evil or like whatever they thought, some dumb thing. And she feels like this is almost she's more tuned in because of that historical connection.
Right. Well, even in the trailer, it gave us what it said something like she's not tuned in. She's on to him, or the suggestion was something like that.
I mean, she's got a blade in the end of her cane.
Right.
She's a fucking badass.
Which, I mean,
she's not to be trifled with.
To look at it, I mean, we didn't even mention his more specific mode of murder and how he's showing it's a whole rig he has set up where in order to show them his victims their own reflection when they're being killed, it's because he has a tripod leg that has a hidden blade underneath it. So he has that one leg extended to stab them in the neck. So then they're looking at the camera that's on the tripod.
Which also has this reflective, what would you call that thing? I mean, it's a mirror. It's a circular mirror that has a hole in the middle so that the lens can shoot through it.
Right.
It's very doctor, old school doctor with the little thing that he puts out, the reflector thing over his eye, which I think furthers this idea of like, it just is in the realm of like experimentation or like being studied or, it's got that vibe. So even if it's just the connective tissue of those feelings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think that's cool. Like it's really effective.
You mean how it's not a regular mirror too with that?
Yeah, it's got sort of a concaveness to it. So it distorts the image, which in itself is so cool because it's like if his whole angle is, oh, I want to capture your true, expression of fear. It's already flawed because his mirror is a distorted concave mirror. It's not going to be a true expression.
I guess so.
So his idea of capturing a true thing in and of itself is distorted.
Yep. It's layer on top of layer.
It's really
with this
good.
one.
Like this, it's good stuff, man.
Anything else stood out to you? You want to mention?
Let's see. Just the color.
That opening shot, it looked like something out of like the 89 Batman. It was just...
I know. It reminded me of the David Bowie album cover. I think...
Ziggy Stardust?
Maybe Ziggy Stardust.
It looks like that.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah.
It looks like a weird matte painting, which it probably is.
Yeah.
But it's cool. It's just the style, man. The style of this movie is really cool and fun and weird. And the color, the use of color is great throughout. Like they isolate people in frame with one person gets one color and one person gets another. Like Helen keeps getting splashed in, like bathed in red light, but then, Mark will be standing behind her and he'll be in this white blue light. And it's just like stuff like that. It's masterful, like DP and, whatever.
Yeah,
lighting design.
They have a lot of playroom because you have the development room in his place. Then you have a film set itself. Yep. So they use that all.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it looks great.
You're into the performances overall too.
Yeah, I think Helen's a little annoying, but I think that's the point in a way. She's very unique looking.
Yeah.
I kept thinking everybody in this movie reminded me of somebody, but I couldn't figure out who. I was like, man, you're so familiar.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe that's just everybody these days with me. Everybody looks familiar to me. What the hell?
You've seen them before.
It's what happens when you get older. Every face, there's only like what? I don't know. I've read this somewhere. There's like 15 facial structures.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you've seen them all.
I'd be curious to see groups of each facial structure.
Right? I would love that. It's like you can look at somebody and be like, oh, that person looks British or looks, I don't know what another example is. But you know what I mean? There is a vague genetic reality to that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not vague, but in our minds, I think it's vague.
I don't know if I can connect that back to Peeping Tom here.
No, but in casting this, everybody who's cast, I feel like, has really distinct eyes. I think they did a really good job of finding people with interesting faces and in particular eyes, which is smart, right? I mean, not that you wouldn't want to do that in general, but it sort of does further along the themes of the movie.
Well, I mean, just to talk about the opening was great, but the opening shot, it's like you're making a movie called Peeping Tom about all this stuff. It was your only option for an opening shot. Luckily, they did it. Close up of an eye, observing. It did so much. Just looking in an eye, looking.
Making the mom blind. Like, it's all very, very well thought out and connected.
Yeah. There's just something, I mean, what is about looking at an eye in close up where to have an eye with no context of what it's looking at, you just only get the sense of this, like, the outwardness that our eyes are. You know, there's no oh God, I don't know how to put it.
Well, our brains are built to try to gather information from the eyes.
It's pure gathering.
Right.
Exactly.
And so whichever way you think you're going, you are seeking out information.
Yeah.
I mean, the eyes are meant for that. So yeah, it's just cool. I feel like the filmmakers and the writer really, really like had a handle on all of this.
Agreed. Good work, guys.
It doesn't feel arbitrary, in other words.
No. Did you have anything else, or should we move on? Next section here.
No. I don't think so. Nothing springs to mind. I love that the dancing extra was left in the trunk.
Yeah.
I just love that. Like, because you kind of know it.
Right.
And then they're doing this scene where it's like, it just is. I love the meta-ness of watching a film crew try to film a thing and like having it relate to the story of the film that we are watching.
Yep.
I just love, that's always fun to me. And so when the director is like, this is the scene that needs to be funny, the scene that we watch unfold is actually funny because we know they're like leading up to this reveal.
Yeah.
And I just, like layering stuff like that is always so fun to me and exciting. I'm like, oh, they're thinking.
Right.
Good job, filmmakers.
I just like to, his position as, you know, a crew member on set who's, though, has aspirations to be like the director.
Yeah.
He's on the side making his own film. That was all fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. All right, then with that, we'll move into our next section. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
So I already mentioned, obviously, the thing that really just as a viewer got annoying was how much Helen says Mark. I mean,
did
it's
not
just
notice that.
Crazy to me.
I really didn't notice that.
I'm amazed that you didn't notice it because it was like at a certain point, it got in my brain where I was like, I stopped watching the movie. Like I finished the movie, and for like 15 minutes after, all I heard was her voice saying Mark over and over again. I was like, this is insane. Like maybe it's purposeful and works in some regard, but it drove me insane.
It felt true to her character that she's kind of excited about making friends with him.
Yeah.
Like you could see, you know, her friends going, geez, everything with you now, Helen, is Mark this, Mark that. You know, he kind of caught it with her.
Yeah. I think, you know, to sort of carry on with her character, it probably wasn't a trope at the time, but I'm over the trope of the woman falling for the mysterious misanthrope.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just that it's a tired thing, and in the current world that we live in, it just doesn't ring true to me anymore. Like I just can't relate to it because I'm like, guys can and are such creeps so often in I mean, this is not like a new thing, but we're honed in on that more as a culture, and rightly so, because there's a lot of creepers out there doing creepy stuff and worse. And so I'm always a little sensitive now to like depictions of that setup, I guess, that almost lean into it being romantic. I'm just like,
It's tricky because it is the kind of situation you want to like bring out the theme and character
I
of
know.
like giving trust over to someone that we shouldn't trust.
Yeah, yes. So I feel,
I mean, the only way I can think of sort of mixing that up is if it's just take out the women romanticized angle of just it's a new friend, it's a platonic male friend or something like that, or like May did it as a gender reversal.
Yeah,
because she's
well,
ultimate
right.
misanthrope, her character.
It's interesting. Yeah, I think it's partially the component of like, oh, I can fix or save him, and that's just you don't
find that relatable though. I mean,
it's tricky.
I feel like that. I don't know. I relate to that instinct of seeing the best in people and wanting to bring out the best in people and. I mean, I like how that's kind of like ongoing thing in the Psycho movies. Clearly, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I like all that. I get how it feels like it's going to come back around, in a way where we are, what you're saying is, I think where we're more at now. But then I feel like then we're going to loop back around where then all of a sudden we see a twist on that where somehow they aren't the actual killer or misanthrope or, like we thought kind of thing.
Well, the reason that I think that I sort of frame it in that at the time it probably wasn't so much of a trope. I think it's become a trope and now we live in a time where we are actively combating bad behavior. And so you don't want to fall into that trope, which in a weird way advocates for romanticizing bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to what you just said, I think you're probably right because through what we as a culture are going through right now, we are learning that the answer is compassion. And so in this movie, it's sort of that was her attempt and the answer for her is to try to be compassionate and actually see a human being and understand them. We still need to do that, but we can't do that and give permission for bad behavior in doing so. So we have to do it in a smart way. And I think you're right. We'll get to those smart ways as a culture.
Yeah.
At some point.
It's at least though it's the point of these movies in the end though is always more on the sort of how they're all victims though,
That's right. But but the trap is that we somehow romanticize him.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be careful about that. I think that's all I'm saying is that it sends up the like whatever the thing.
Yeah, well it's
to me to be like, okay, yeah.
It's super fascinating because it's kind of like the good with the bad of, the misanthrope character and maybe the attraction to people like that is they are somehow, outside the norm, which is also harmful, So it's
right. I think
like,
being categorical about it is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
We should not live in a world where we go, oh, that person looks a certain way, therefore they are a certain way, therefore I've made a judgment on them. We shouldn't do that. That's not great. But we also should be smart about our instincts toward people. It's kind of what we talked about a little bit, this instinct versus intuition thing is something that we as human beings need to be better about tuning into. Some people are good at it, some people aren't. And culture sometimes gets it wrong as to how to frame that stuff and I think leads people, maybe not intentionally, but can lead people in the wrong direction.
How do you define one or the other with instinct versus intuition and then also, I mean, for me, because when we were talking about it, we were sort of talking about it in terms of that's the scary thing, is as from a subjective point of view, not knowing what is one or the other. So how do you have thoughts on that? It sounds like you are more
so
like
my
knowing.
thought would be instinct is more lizard brainy.
Fight or flight stuff.
Correct. Whereas intuition is something you can cultivate. I think intuition is a product of learning how to read your instincts.
So how does one hone intuition?
That, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I feel like it's only through experience, and it has to and whether that goes one way or the other.
Yeah, it's got to be, right? It's got to be intertwined with how you build empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that some people, some percentage of people out there can't build empathy. But they can manipulate the constructs around behavior for their own benefit. And those are the people that we need to be careful about, right? Like we need to have a better sense of the signs that those people, it's really difficult. This is like the battle in a way.
Well, it's like in this movie, to frame it, it's Helen versus her mother's instinct and intuition.
Yeah.
Of the mother's intuition is right that, hey, you can't trust this Mark guy. Something's just off. And Helen's maybe, it seems like it's her intuition telling her to trust this guy, because her intuition isn't wrong that, it's validated by that once they get the camera gone, he does have a side of himself that's
right
outside of, that's not his murderous self.
That's right. Yes. It's all very, it's layered and complicated.
But that just affected your viewing in a negative way?
Well, it just kind of like, it sends up a signal initially of like, I don't know what you would call it, of just like squirminess for me, where I'm like, ooh.
So how would you, let's say, is there a version of this you could adapt for today's age? Put a twist on it somehow you'd feel good about?
That is a difficult question to answer.
Or just scrap the idea, how it is more so.
I think you can. I think it would just involve a little bit more. I think in a way, maybe what a modern version of this could or would want to do is to combine Helen and her mother into one character, so that you have her ability internally to question things and to be listening to both sides of their impulses or just their perception of things.
Yeah.
And so then you can have that debate internally of like, well, I have compassion for this person. This person is a human being, but this other part of my brain is getting fired off. What's that all about? And like, how do I as a character deal with that? And I think then you can, in a modern way, you would feel less like we're falling into a two-dimensional trope.
Right. Helen's just fully trusting the whole time. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And, she's not, there are moments when she pushes back and she says, oh my God, like, turn it off, and why are you showing me this, and whatever. But then she doesn't do what seems like nowadays would be the next logical step, which is to get out of there.
Right. Is it different for you at all in, let's say, The Tenant, where the main character in that was entirely a victim? Because remember, there's a similar case of the woman, the love interest, whatever you want to call her, and that like fully trusting, fully being on his side, reaching out, and, romanticizing his, specifically being into him out of the misanthrope, out of all her other friends.
Yeah, but it's different because she's she is not privy to all the information.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's part of the story, is keeping her in the dark, keeps her, open in a way. Like if she knew everything, if he told her that he was living in that apartment and he told her like everything that was going on, I think she would have a different sense of him. But they really separated in that movie.
I'm just keep thinking of May now, where it was really interesting. And one thing I liked about this movie, and bring up a lot of movies we covered do this, of it being so stylized yet also capturing a realism. I feel like that movie handled what you're talking about well. And it's interesting because it'd be Jeremy Sisto, the guy, romanticizing May. But in that case, it felt like it works, or it's not a total romanticization because of the realism it takes place in. Then when we're looking at something like Peeping Tom, it so feels like that a movie.
Yeah. The era and the style it's much different.
But I wonder if you're looking at just modern films too, if that's something that could help allay that trope or worry for you, is if you just go hard, if you just buy into it as being, well, I could make this critique, but at the same time, this seems so realistic how it's playing out that it's hard for me too.
Well, the Joker does it.
Just Joker?
Joker. Yeah, it does it by actually subverting the reality of the women in the movie.
Right. They're not real. And so when they behave in certain ways, you can still play out tropes. You can get away with that because ultimately they are tropes. Yeah, he's living the trope in his head.
That's right.
The fantasy.
So that's interesting. I don't know. Food for thought, I guess.
Great. Well, I mean, we kind of veered into feels like more thing of notey stuff, but since we are in what did not work, anything else? I mean,
my only other thing was like I kind of was hit or miss with the music.
I didn't notice music one way or the other.
It's really 60s sort of boppy.
Oh, I was into it because of that.
I dig it because it's cool and it's of that era and I like that.
Yeah.
But it did make me wonder how much different this movie would be with like an ominous score.
I don't know. For me, that when the music, it's. I don't know if it has that like it's that as easy as to say it has that ironic edge to it or something,
Maybe, yeah.
or that discordant. What is it? Disparate feel to it. I don't know. For me, anything that puts me in that place and time lent itself to helping it.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. It's more of a like question mark of would something else be better rather than it didn't work.
Right.
But other than that, no, I mean, not really.
It's funny. I can't even. I'm supposed to explain. This is where I just have to back up why I feel the way I do, but I really can't. If it was just sort of like feeling a little long, or I wasn't super into it on this first viewing, I really can't say why. But I really can't say why it wasn't working for me in that sense. But that was my experience watching it.
I guess the only other thing is that it does not play up suspense in the way that, like, say, a Hitchcock movie will.
Maybe that was it. Like, I wasn't feeling the sort of the driving, like, question throughout the whole thing. It was pretty just going along. Yeah. Oh, he kills one other person eventually. Like, but no, I don't even want to put it that way, as if it's just like I'm waiting for the new kill every 20 minutes. Like, it wasn't that, but it was this ongoing.
Yeah.
Like it was lacking that thrust for me in a way. Picked up by the end for sure, but had its ups and downs.
Yeah, I think that's it for me though. Like, it just didn't quite. It's like with a movie like this, I think you want to see. You want to see the boulder get pushed up the hill, and then when it gets to the top, it's like we get to watch it roll down and gain speed and like feel like, oh no, like it's gonna get bad and then it's gonna get worse, and it doesn't quite have that like.
Yeah, even with the suspense of him getting caught, that should be there. It wasn't really there. The cops were just kind of like, okay, well, we aren't very suspicious of you. Are you suspicious of them? I don't know, maybe. I don't know. It was that wasn't really there.
Yeah.
But,
whereas like Psycho feels like we get ramped up. Like it's playing with us. But like it really feels like you're constantly going, oh no.
Yeah. Well, Psycho's also the best movie ever. So
I know. Well, fair enough.
Great. I think with that, then we're going to move on to our next section. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
I mean, where my mind went, the thing I just had to know, Tim, with this movie, I had to figure out for myself, who is Tom in the phrase Peeping Tom? Didn't you wonder that? Did you think
At
that?
one point I did. I was like, Peeping Tom, more like Peeping Mark. And then I said, I'm going to say that in this episode of the podcast, and it's going to be a really bad joke.
Well, there we had it, folks.
Yeah.
Yay.
We did it. It's like it had to be done.
So do you know where that name comes from as a
Oh,
lore?
the history of that? Oh,
yeah, that's
man.
what I was saying. Is who's Tom?
I do not know the historical significance of Peeping Tom.
Do you know the significance or story of Lady Godiva?
Oh, God. No. I mean, I've heard the name, but...
Right. No, I'm with you. I wasn't too familiar, but that was the story of a, let's see from Wikipedia, late Anglo-Saxon noblewoman, relatively well-documented wife of the Earl of Mercia, blah, 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 blah. Mainly remembered for a legend dating back to at least the 13th century in which she rode naked, covered only in her long hair through the streets of Coventry to gain a remission of the oppressive taxation that her husband imposed on his tenants. The name Peeping Tom for a voyeur originates from later versions of this legend, in which a man named Thomas watched her ride and was struck blind or dead.
Oh, wow.
It's cool.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very noteworthy.
Exactly. I mean, it was the first time we hear that phrase so much, Peeping Tom, and it was just the first time I went, wait, who's Tom?
Who's this Tom fellow
Yeah.
you keep mentioning?
Also from now the Wikipedia on the film Peeping Tom, not the person or legend, just about, a bit more context on its release and how it was received. I thought this was a fun anecdote. Peeping Tom's depiction of violence and its lurid sexual content made it a controversial film on initial release, and the critical backlash heaped on the film was a major factor in finishing Powell's career as a director in the United Kingdom.
Whoa.
So apparently he had only get films up and made in Australia after this.
Brutal.
Carlene's Bohm later remembered that after the film's premiere, nobody from the audience went to shake the hand of him or Michael Powell.
Get a grip, everybody.
Right? Well,
Come on.
Made me think too of the Psycho comparison. Why that one got the free pass, in a way. And I think it was a combination of the context of Hitchcock as a director.
Yeah.
We expected he's the macabre director, which Michael Powell did not have that reputation. This was a surprise based on his filmography. But also that like we look at, there's a whole documentary I recommended about just the shower scene in Psycho.
Right.
And I think that can be looked at as a turning point, a milestone, all sorts of things. But I feel like in Psycho, it handled all that violence, transgressiveness, the point of view stuff in a single scene or, a single moment too, you could say. This one was just the movie. Here you go,
Yeah, there isn't a quintessential scene in this movie.
There was no turning point that sort of is shocking enough,
right?
That it then somehow people are on the ride with it, I guess. Versus this, it's just you're sitting down and watching the opening scene and can see them going, "Oh, this is so lurid." And
Right. Right. Interesting. Yeah. Bummer, though.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, no, now, though, we could say it's gotten its praise years later.
That's true.
Scorsese's talking it up, as we said. It's a Criterion release, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Great. Well, did you have anything for things of note?
No, not really. One question, though, because I didn't really look this up. Why is it listed as 62 release in a bunch of places? Like even the rental, or not the rental, but like on Amazon, we watched it. It says 1962. But all over the place online, it says 1960.
U.S. was its...
is that why?
Yeah, it was the 1962 release.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough.
And
That's
then April 1960 was when it was released in the UK.
Got it. Okay.
So there's the answer to your very specific question. There you go. The last thing that I had, because it's fun whenever we can tie our films that we do to other films that we've done. This film is referenced by Ghostface in Wes Craven's Scream 4 as being the first film to, quote, put the audience in the killer's point of view.
Cool.
Boom, bada boom.
Yeah. We didn't really touch on this too much, maybe because it's just kind of obvious, but there is a major, major component in this film revolving around sexual repression specifically.
We've talked about that a lot with The Tenant, Psycho.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. Yeah.
It's almost like too obvious in a way because of how this movie is constructed. So I keep using the word construct and constructed today. What's up with that?
They're just helpful words.
You know what it is?
About film.
It's because there's construction in my apartment right now.
Your kitchen will no longer be repressed.
Oh, how nice. It would be so liberating.
Right. It's going to have all this, these useless shelves aren't going to be there. It can breathe. It can stretch its legs finally.
That's right.
Great.
Open concept, baby.
Open concept. Great. Well, is that it then for...
Yeah, that's it.
For Peeping Tom from 60 in the UK, 62 in the States. We have our RecommenDEADtions to wind down with. Is there anything you'd like to recommend, Ed? I have something to recommend, Ed.
I do, Ryan.
What is it?
It's called Sightseers.
I think I've heard of it. What is it?
Where was this made? I think it's... I'd have to look it up. It's directed by Ben Wheatley. I kind of don't want to say anything about it. It's one of those. A lot of these are one of those. But it's a couple who have a little caravan in the... I can't remember where they are. British somewhere. UK somewhere. Maybe Ireland.
Great.
I don't know.
Well,
And it's fun.
I owe Ben Wheatley another shot. I've only seen Kill List.
See, I really like Kill List.
I really did not.
I know you don't.
For whatever reason at the time. So, I don't know. I feel pretty alone in that. But I'll check out Sightseers. And he has a new movie, I believe, that's just coming out. He's attached to all sorts of stuff going on.
Fun.
Well, oh yeah, he did the Rebecca remake on Netflix.
With Armie Hammer, the now disgraced maybe eats people.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that real?
Certainly what is real or seems to be confirmed to be real is that he's got some intense kink that also involves underage girls. So he definitely is, probably a gnarly dude.
And there's two of him in...
That's right. I mean, I guess for legal reasons, all allegedly. But I've read some of the text conversations between him and one of the first women.
Those were real?
Oh, yeah. And they're pretty shocking.
Well, I'll say nothing. I don't want to kink shame. But I have not read them myself.
Yeah,
Okay, Ben Wheatley.
Let's call it problematic.
He's also attached to do. Just have him up. He did. Did he do the original, the new Tomb Raider? He's attached to the Tomb Raider 2.
Wow,
of the new ones. Funny.
that's fun.
Great. Well, I'll recommend Dead. Been meaning to watch it while I have this limited Apple Plus subscription for a month. I was going to watch some stuff on there. Sofia Coppola's new film, On the Rocks.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. You know that film? You've seen it around? You heard of it?
Yeah, kind of. I've heard of her.
Bill Murray and Rashida Jones.
Yeah, that's right. Sure.
It was great in how good it was. It was just this nice, like, simple story, well told. It's fun to watch the actors do their thing and get caught up in the world. It just made me really enjoy, it's her sensibilities and her filmmaking was refreshingly just, I don't know, just a movie that, in not trying to do so much, somehow was so much. If that makes sense.
That seems like her style.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So I'll recommend that one. What I've been watching recently.
Word up.
Great. Well, Tim, do you want to randomly select the film we'll be watching next week?
Yeah, I'm looking at it at our hat, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna kind of go like. All right, we are going to watch The Entity from 1982.
Oh, this is one. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen it. This is the one with Barbara Hershey.
Okay,
I've always wanted to see this one.
Cool.
Pretty sure I haven't. Cool.
Well, there you go.
This is like
another, I don't think I.
This
have
is
either.
another one with the Entity, the Tenant, and the what's the other one that we just watched with the floor upstairs? The Sentinel. All three of these I always confused. And wait, what's the one with George C. Scott? Is it in like the haunted house with the bouncing ball?
Oh God, yeah. What is that called? Oh my God, what is that? The Changeling.
So all of those movies I always confused. So now we'll finally have them all sorted out, hopefully.
Awesome.
After seeing The Entity.
All right.
Great.
Well, fun.
Well, if you made it this far, we do appreciate you making it this far. You can find us wherever you found us. I'm Ryan McDuffie. With me here is Tim Aslin. Our mixer master is Brendan Welch. Our big ask is, should you, if you made it this far, as I just said, and you enjoyed being here, tell a friend.
Yeah, tell a friend.
Or not, that's fine too.
Or tell a stranger.
Yeah. Just tell someone. No. You don't have to tell someone. We're happy to have you here. Either way, all at the same time. Great. Well, in closing, whether you're Peeping Tom or Mark, we thank you so much for listening.
And we will see you next time.
Goodbye.